What is up, guys? Lord Nick here, bringing you another One Piece related video. This video, guys, we're going to be continuing the Success with Dressrosa series to episode 2, the longest running series we've done, as I don't think I've tested anything past episode 1 of any of our series so far. But this series, guys, is focused on building success with the Dressrosa builds, specifically with Rebecca. We are trying to learn the matchups, learn some of the sticky nature of the deck, trying to figure out what is our best game plan in between each of those decks. We're going to be building this upon my experience of playing into many of the matchups that are going to be in the current meta, as there's multiple one tricks here in Austin, and Austin, I feel, has a very strong overall player base. So let's jump into it, guys. This week, we are still using the same list, though conversations have been rising. It has been popping up. Do we discuss using, instead of Orlumbus, maybe using something like Robin? And Robin might be a better option overall. Based off of what folks are saying, based off of what the meta is starting to turn out to, I think next set that might be the optimal play. We might move this into 2 copies of Robin to be the backup to the Haj Rudins, because I think the Haj Rudins is just in general very powerful on his own, but the Robin does require us to have either Haj Rudin, Aramaki, or Kuzan. And because if you haven't seen it in my most recent video, I will be probably removing the Leos and putting in multiple copies of, what's his name? Oh, shoot, Jozu coming out in the next set. And we're looking at possibly running Jax as well. Robin makes a lot of sense in potential of the deck, so it could just be that we move into that. There's some argument of also testing out Ice Ages over Patchwork, but I think Patchwork is just good enough as is because it is searchable. And we have enough reduction in the deck as is that I don't think we necessarily need something like that. But after all that, what are we focusing on today? Well, today is going to be our Reiju matchup, guys. So this is going to be the focus of the video. We're going to be breaking down what are going to be our best plays, our best options, and some gameplay of me playing into a Reiju. Note, I would have loved to be able to have 2 to 3 Reiju matchups to showcase to you guys. Throughout this week, I've spent whatever time I've had to curate and play into Reiju. 2 of those times I forgot to record. And then today I've been spending it since probably about 10 or 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. till now, almost 1 p.m., looking for Reiju matchups to play. The problem I'm running into also is the fact that the Reijus keep dodging. And I know the comment's going to say, why don't you just play it in ranked? Well, sorry, in the ranked, I have even less option currently of figuring out who I'm going into. Right now, I could at least choose the matchups, right? They've made some really cool headway into that, but, like, the person can just dodge you, and they did that. And a lot of them don't want to play into Rebecca, and the big part of that is it's a grindy matchup. It takes forever. And if they don't run into Rebecca in the competitive, run into Rebecca's in competitive, they're never going to let us test into them. I did stock one particular Reiju who I did get a video off of today. And that was just because he was the only one that was taking some time to look at his hand before he quit. And I think he was just quitting with terrible hands. And then finally he got a hand that I assume was either just as bad as the rest and he gave up on quitting or whatever. But he decided to play into me. Now, in that video, I don't have the first 2 turns showed. My opponent doesn't really do a whole lot. I just set up a Coliseum into a Kyros, and then on my 3rd turn, I play my Sabo, and then we go into my opponent's 3rd turn. Note, I'm believing at this point, like, I just don't know what my opponent was doing in his first couple of turns, but he was just not putting tempo out on the board, and then he also did a really interesting, I'm going to go with misplay on his turn, on his 3rd turn. So let's jump into it, guys. Let's kind of watch the video, and then we'll get some more insight at the end of the video, kind of breaking down what are going to be our optimal plays into the Reiju. So starting us off, guys, in the video here, my opponent is currently taking his sweet time playing out Reiju. This is his 3rd turn. He has not played anything. And note, I decide here to keep my Sabo. I've mentioned it in the comments, like I've talked to people either in the Discord or in the comments down below, that building a blocker does not necessarily mean we have to use a blocker. For your first 2 life, almost every matchup, you kind of are okay with taking those first 2 life. Just because you don't really feel the threat or the need to have to play the blocker yet, right? Like, that's just 2 extra cards. Yes, I understand Reiju's run pudding. Yes, this guy actually is running pudding. But you can't just play in fear like the pudding is going to end you. There are certain decks that, yeah, you need those 9 cards in hand, and you need to be that greedy. But If that is what you need in Rebecca, then you're crutching on just having card advantage, which is what the deck kind of wants to do. Honestly, I'll give you that. Like, it wants to be at 7 cards if it can, but you don't have to be. Your cards are good enough tools. If you're a strong enough player, you can play down in the 4 or 5 card range, maybe even the 3 card range, pretty consistently and pretty well. That's why I'm pretty good into Gecko, and I think our deck in general is pretty good into Gecko. But my opponent here, if he wants to play the pudding this turn, he would have had to do it off the Porsche. He plays the Porsche, doesn't play anything. So this is where I think he makes a misplay. But he could, obviously, he could just have nothing super worth it to play off the Porsche. My first thought when he did this was, oh, maybe he's trying to play for a judge next turn. I think there's a baby or 2 in his trash right now. And to my knowledge, there's actually only 1 baby in the trash. And he doesn't throw another one in there using his stage. Instead, he just throws a big Ichiji, which is telling me he wants to Ichiji this next turn. He might have been trying to Ichiji off the Porsche, and then he just clicked through it too fast and misplayed. It could just be something that happened on Sim. But let's, for argument's sake, let's say he's setting up for something here. And if that's the case, then we're just kind of in the driver's seat here. An Ichiji here would have been a little bit sticky. We would have had to give up one of our 1Ks and our 2K just to make sure we don't take the damage, because I wouldn't want to use the blocker quite yet. We want to kind of establish it. But if he developed an Ichiji here, then he probably doesn't have another one quite yet, hopefully. Based off of how this is going, he doesn't have another one. So we'd kind of just want to leave it on board because its on playability is stronger than just its body. Because either way, it's going to swing. But giving him the on play is actually kind of bad in this scenario, just because it's not really taxing him too much on the Dawn overall. So this turn, it's pretty straightforward. We need to get a Hajruden out. We need to start developing our cost reduction before he starts getting a big enough board state. He doesn't have a character we can swing into. We don't have a Gyatz, so we are just going to swing at face, try to get a card out of his hand, and then add in a 2K to our hand to replace the card that we just played, which is exactly how it goes. We are now at 2 2Ks that we can use. We also have an extra Hajruden that we can counter with, because I don't think there's really any way that while it's standing for him to get rid of the Hajruden. He does find the Reiju. I'm thinking, oh, he's at 8 Dawn. He's just going to judge here. But I need to counter out of stuff. So he does a 5K to a 6K. We just block. We just counter out of that. That's fine. That's perfectly okay. We're sitting pretty here. He hasn't been able to get an attack through. He now has a character that we can swing in and take care of. He does play a Reiju here to fill up his hand again. So now he's starting to develop a little bit of a board state. I think this turn he also Ichijis, which is fine. He's developing characters, but he's not going to, like, if we can clear most of his board this next turn, he doesn't have a lot of attacks he can come through with. So that's going to be our game plan, is to clear out the board as best we can. All right, it's an AK swing. We have to take it. I'm not going to blow that many counters just to deal with it. So here I'm debating who I need to take care of. I was like, all right, you know what? We could go for the Ichiji, but we're just going to go for the Reiju. I almost hard played the Brook, but then I remembered, oh yeah, there's Bardo in trash, right? And so I play the Rebecca to then play the Brook to get the Bardo back. You could obviously just hard play the Brook. That's not that terrible a play, but just efficiency. It also sets up another blocker, so it makes his game plan a little bit more difficult. So we do 7 into the 5 because we want to clear board. I was debating here, do I want to swing 9 into the Ichiji? I then decide pretty fast, yeah, you know what, we need to go 9 into Ichiji, see if we can get a 2K and a 1K out of it. He lets it die, which to me was like, oh, so he has another baby to play it. But that's kind of weird nonetheless, with how many cards is in his hand. So we now have a very controlling board state. He sets up the judge a turn after the turn I thought he would do it, but it's whatever. It's not that big a deal. So he's going to play one of each now. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Easy bounce here would be the Rebecca blocker. That's always a card that we're okay if they bounce it. Any of our cards really that they can bounce, we're okay with it just because they're all on play, so it's just problematic for him anyways. So yeah, bounce the blocker, get rid of the... It's pretty easy. We need to keep the Brook alive here, though, so like that's our only real focus, is that I know I need to play for the Brook. He decides to minus 2K the Brook, which just means it takes an extra 2K to keep him alive, which luckily we actually have. So at this point, it's just keep the Brook alive. And a lot of you might be wondering, well, why do we play to keep the Brook alive? What's so important here? Well, we're gonna Kuzan this next turn. We're gonna kill the judge because he's the big guy and he can't come back. So we're gonna KO the judge. We're then gonna use the Brook to help get rid of the next biggest target, or well, the second biggest remaining target, which is the Niji. We're swinging 5 at face just because we just want to test to get cards out of his hand. We're going to swing the Brook at face. He's not going to do anything, but his swing is going to kill us a Niji. And then we could go 7 at the Ichiji, and I think here the option that I was looking at was, you know what, I'm going to go push face because I want to get more cards out of his hand. So, because I was pretty positive he's just going to counter out. And he did. He did exactly that. So now he is low on cards. He's trying to set up for the Reiju, which is perfectly fine by us. We're just getting resources out of his hand. Now, if we swung at the Niji, he could get rid of 1 card probably there. Which right now I think he's at 4 cards. He might be at 5 cards. And if he's at 5 cards, it just makes it a little bit more tricky of how he needs to play around the Reiju. He just goes face here. We do have the counter for it, and so I was just going to play off the counter. I was like, you know what? If he tries to clear board here, that's fine. Those are pseudo blockers essentially at this point. And he just sticks forward onto the Reiju so that he can clear the Brook. I let it happen because I'm not really afraid of what he can do with 3 Dawn. Forgetting that he could Porsche into another Ichiji, right? Like, that is an option that he can do, is Porsche into another Ichiji. And then I think he just does a 5k swing with leader and then does the Porsche. So we just 1k. Just got to make sure I do the right 1k. We hold on to the Leo because we have an extra Hajrunin. He does Porsche. I don't remember what he gets from it. I think it is no, he did Niji. That's right. He did a Niji, and he's bouncing the Kyros, which now gives us 3 KO targets in hand. So I'm going to activate leader first just to see if we can find something, I think, is what I did this turn. I'm also debating my attacks and my play lines. So we activate leader. We find a Sabo. Sabo is kind of the card that we want to find. We could potentially do the patchwork. Now that I'm looking at it, you could have taken the patchwork there and locked down the Ichiji, which might be the play, so that we can starve one of his attacks the next turn. And we would have had the Dawn to do it anyways. So that is a route that we could have gone, and I now look back at it and I'm like, I probably could have done that. And it would have been smarter because it would have kept us with more 2Ks the following turn. But ultimately, still, I think it's a fine play of what we end up doing. We end up playing out our characters to KO all of his stuff. So as we kind of skip through it a little bit, we do the Brook. We end up KOing stuff. I decide before we do a Leo, we're going to just try to clear this Ichiji anyways. He does double 2Ks to keep it alive. We then swing 8 into it, so he just needs another 2K. He misplays here and does a 1K and then does a 2K on top of it. So we do get an extra card because our opponent doesn't pay attention to the Dawn amount. So now he can do a 7 at life. We're going to block it, so we have no real threat that he can do enough. We've seen enough Porsches and enough baby Ichijis. I don't think he can come through with this. So he does set up a queen to protect his board state and to protect his life. But we're sitting in a pretty good spot now. We're now up to a couple extra 2Ks. And ultimately here, I'm just looking at clearing board. And he lets the Ichiji die, which I thought was pretty weird. So we do 1 Dawn onto the Brook. I should have, in hindsight here, you should always swing with the Brook first so you clear the blocker. And then you can choose to go into the Ichiji. But I chose the wrong order there because I just didn't think about it and just kind of played a little fast. So, at this point, it's just develop 2 blockers. You could arguably keep the Bardo. But we'll talk about card selection here. Why I get rid of the 2K is because I now know there's 2 Luffy's in trash and one of my Moncherie in trash, which would mean if this game goes much later than a couple more turns, I'd need to use a Rebecca to get a Luffy back if I don't hold on to the Moncherie. I currently now have 2 blockers that can't be KO'd. He's already used his Nijis a lot, and if he uses a Niji to bounce something, that means there's only 1 Ichiji. So either way, we can survive the turn. So we decide, I decide the Moncherie is more important than the 2K right now. And the Gravity Blade's more important because if he sets up another Ichiji turn, then I actually have a way of dealing with the Ichiji pretty easily now. Which he does set it up, but we end up hitting a top deck that's actually just better. So he sets up a Reiju into an Ichiji. He does a couple swings, and oh wow, we hit the Aramaki, so we Aramaki, leader ability, and we're just going to play this way. It doesn't matter which of the 2 cards we take. We're going to be, trashing them either way. We now get to just swing 5 at life with Brook. and then a 10 with lead. 10 with Kuzan. I said 10 with lead. 10 with Kuzan. We now have him at 1 life. The next turn, we just need Aramaki Kuzan to swing, and we're good. He starts trying to set up the similar board state that he just had. He bounces the Brook. We do a 10 at life with the Kuzan initially. Cool. All right. So now, at this point, we just activate lead. We're going to play down. We're going to play it a little safe. We're going to add the Kyros to hand here. Going to play Rebecca into the getting back. I think it was a 2K. We're going to play the Brook, back down, KO. And then we're going to discard using the Aramaki to bottom deck the Reiju, which it didn't matter which one we bottom decked, which one we didn't. And then I'm like, 16 swing is game winning, right? Like, just to get out of this, like, his hand has to be full counter, which he did actually have a ton of 2Ks and a lot of 1Ks, but he's 1 counter off of surviving that. And then if he did, then it would have been a 6. We could have easily gone for a 6 and in the game there. But ultimately, in this matchup, what I ended up doing correctly in here, opposed to what a lot of people might consider being weird plays, is I'm just playing for board state. Like, at no point am I like, okay, I need to close the game out now. Oh, no, he has a lot of cards. I'm not letting his hand dictate what I'm doing. I am letting the board dictate what I'm doing. I'm letting my life dictate what I'm doing, right? Like, I let myself take the first 2 life. Well, the first one was not really a let. I had 1Ks in hand. And I could throw all of them to survive or not. And then the second one, it's just too much power, and I want to hold on to my 2Ks longer. So here, ultimately, like, I just played for board state. I didn't let him get to establish too many multiple attack turns outside of leader and 1 Ichiji. And because of that, like, I don't think he ever got to swing at my life outside of the 1 Porsche swing with anything other than Ichiji and leader. If all he's able to do is 2 swings at us, and he doesn't have a consistent way of getting rid of every blocker that we have, you know, if he has to take an off turn to play the pudding, make him take the off turn to play the pudding. Like, that doesn't hurt us nearly as bad as it hurts him, because he needs to keep tempo over us. Pudding does not keep tempo over us. Pudding stops us from setting up for a late game, but once we're already in late game, it doesn't really matter. The pudding's not going to hurt much. So, like, early on here, he could have pudding to get rid of the hand that had a Kuzan in it. But on the turn that he would have been able to pudding, we already had the Hajruden. So he's already staring down a card that's making it going to be hellacious for him. And I'm not playing a ton of cards, so he's obviously thinking, oh, it's just a handful of counter. And if that's the case, it becomes really tricky. Do you get rid of all the counter, or do you try to play it out? In this case here, I don't think he made too many, like, mistakes that, like, severely limited his game. But he made enough mistakes of not... his mistakes were more driven by the fact that he doesn't understand the deck, right? He doesn't understand what are the targets that he needs to be focusing on. We should. That's all you really need to know to win a matchup that is even considered a bad matchup. What are your targets? When do you go for these targets? When is it better just to leave something on the board, right? So if my opponent was consistently just cycling the big ones into his trash, and the cards that he's getting off of here are just all the small ones, right? Yeah, we're just going to clear board. It doesn't matter, because he's just going to get it back anyways, and it's just forcing him to have to replay it. Most of these not getting any swings is what will win us the game. If he can't swing with any character other than the Ichijis, we can grind out and win the game, because he's not getting to attack. Look, he floods the board here, and we still managed to deal with the board. Which is all you have to do, is manage the board, deal with the board. I left this Ichiji up for like 3 turns. I know everybody's inclination is, oh, we got to kill Ichiji. Well, no. If he's going to bring it back, this card is just worse on board than it is coming back, because it does the same thing either way. But if it's coming into play that turn, it gives a -2K to one of our stuff. That's crazy problematic for us, right? Like, he just makes all of our blockers die. He can just kill one of our arrested characters, essentially. So, no, don't give that to them. If you can bottom deck it, great, but if it's the only threat they have and we can consistently keep throwing blockers in front of it, then do that. That is your game plan. That is how you do it. You just, leader swings are 5 and 6. Okay, counter out of those. This guy's coming in for 7, and we're already at 3 life. Block it. That's it. That's all it is. It's super simple. It's super straightforward. Play for board. Put out blockers. counter the small things, but don't like overcommit to countering out of the big things if you don't have to, and don't overcommit to having to clear the Ichijis, right? Ichiji is a problem card. He is a difficult card for us to deal with, but he's much more difficult to deal with when you keep giving them the ability to bring him back and doing his ability over and over and over again. If he's just a 7k body, he's just a 7k body. Yes, my opponent could have tried to get more aggressive with just Ichiji leader swings, and he might have been able to chip down my life at that point and set up for an Ichiji play. But the general premise is if a Reiju does that, they're telling you they don't have anything, or they're just trying to play defensively. Most Reijus aren't going to try to do that because that is opening them up. There's so much punishment from other decks that they can get for doing something like that. They don't want to try to do that into somebody, especially somebody who's showing blue on their board and showing black on their board. Those are two of the colors Reiju hates. So ultimately, the goal is clear board, chip at life, and just keep blockers up. Clear board, chip at life, keep blockers up. If it takes you 2 extra turns to kill them, it takes you 2 extra turns to kill them. The way you win is by winning the game. It's not by, oh, I have to win earlier. Like, no, take your time. Go to turn 8s, go to turn 10s, go to turn 12s, right? Like, shoot, if you have to, go to turn 15. Like, at no point did I fear like I was going to, like, completely lose control of the game. Once I saw what the board states were, once I saw what I could be putting out, I was pretty positive. Okay, 2 blockers saves me here. 2 blockers saves me here. 2 blockers saves me here. There's not much they can do to stop that. So, yeah, guys, hopefully you find this video at least somewhat informative, somewhat helpful for you and your Reiju matchups. I will be around in the Discords to help you with them and kind of do that and kind of talk about it. Again, I'm sorry that I didn't get more than one matchup to showcase to you. Because, yeah, being behind in a Reiju matchup definitely feels different than being ahead in a Reiju matchup, but you can often play from behind to get ahead. The matchup should be a little bit closer than this most of the time, but hopefully, guys, hopefully, you enjoy the video. And I hope to hear from you guys. And until the next video, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye, guys.